Well, I would describe myself as a producer, a social entrepreneur, and a woman who cares deeply about making change in the world.
Thinking about women and the girl effect. How do you think this world right now would be if young girls had access to education, well, from 100 years ago until now?
It would be a very different world. It would be a very different world, and I don't know that it's enough for young girls to have access to education. I think we need to transform the whole culture, because educating women is a very important piece, but it's the culture of violence against women and of fear of things associated with the feminine and of undervaluing those human qualities associated with the feminine that I think is the deeper cultural illness and imbalance that we suffer from.
Mm-hmm. And but when I was asking about the girl effect, because all the studies say that when a person invests in one young girl from a developing country, for example, they see that they normally invest in their community, in their families. They reinvest all the knowledge and everything. And there was this one man that said that if you want the world to change immediately, put women, and it was a man, put women in charge of everything.
So your question is a really good one, and I think I have to take a moment. I have had to take a moment to really consider it more deeply, because if every girl child 100 years ago was educated all over the earth, it would have changed all of our human systems. It would have changed industrialized civilization. We might not be in the mess we're in right now. We might have a smaller global population. We might have more people growing food closer to where they live. We would have better parenting and better education for our children. And we might not have gone as far as we have to destroy the living systems upon which all of human life depends. And so in truth, I think women in leadership, more women in leadership, is essential. But I also think that it's not just about women in leadership. I think that what we're facing is a challenge to shift how we think about the human presence on Earth. And so for me, the two issues are inextricably woven, one of which is actually maybe three. One of which is about women and girls and helping invest in them and educate them and raise them up into positions of leadership. And it's almost like a fractal. On a larger octave, there is the issue for all of us of revaluing those human characteristics that have been associated with the feminine and therefore have been systematically devalued and derided, and so I think that it's restoring the feminine to a place of balance in our culture as well as raising up women. And then the third octave is really our relationship with the earth. I often think of the challenges we face as really being at its core a crisis of relationship, that we're in a challenge of relationship with ourselves, because we've all been taught to look more at the parts we don't like than appreciate the parts of ourselves we do like. We've all, I think, been acculturated to value our more masculine characteristics and devalue our more feminine characteristics. And so that's the relationship with ourselves, and then with each other. We've been trained to focus more on the differences than to find common ground. We've by and large, had a greater focus on individuality than on the collective and the commons and how we get along. And at the largest octave, it's really about our relationship with the earth, our mother, you know. So these are all, for me, different octaves of relationship with the feminine.
When you said collectiveness, I thought, imagine that you are invited, well, this new project, this new dictionary that doesn't explain words with simple words, with another words, but with stories, like short stories, like life stories. And you are invited to contribute to this new dictionary. And the word for you to propose one story that could reveal really the essence of the word is oneness. What story could you tell?
Well, what a great question. I might tell the story of the first time that I felt called to work for the natural world, because I grew up in a city, and I was the daughter of two artists, and so I had a limited experience of nature as a child. You know, I was in the parks every now and then, but as I got older and went to college and university, I lived in the country, and I loved arts, and I didn't like science. And I found it too linear, and I didn't see how it would have any bearing on my life. And I went to work in theater because I thought that the terrain that we most needed to change was the landscape between our ears, and that theater and a direct experience was what had the greatest capacity to change people. And then I went to work in professional theater, and I discovered how little there was transformational theater and how hard it would be to make a living at that. And so I gave up, and I pursued other paths, and I worked in the arts because, again, that was what I thought was the most effective change-making strategy. And then I met Kenny, and we were invited to go visit a biodiversity garden in southern New Mexico. And I didn't know anything about farming or gardening, but I had learned by then that the more I was in nature, the more I felt whole and centered and connected and oneness. And the more that I lived, I learned that it was kind of a spiritual source for me, nature. And so we went to visit this garden, and it was being tended by a master gardener who had traveled all over the world and collected seeds from peoples all over the world. And he was preserving hundreds and hundreds of traditional and heirloom varieties of food plants in that garden, and flowers and herbs. And so he took us on a tour of his garden, and we walked through, and he introduced us to every plant, and he would tell us its Latin name, and then he would tell us its common name. And he invited us to taste things as we went along, and there were more diverse food plants than I had ever seen anywhere. There were whole societies of tomatoes. They were like every color and shape, and they were all warm in the sun, and so you could smell them. And we were tasting as we went through the garden, and there were herbs I'd never heard of. You know, there was a lemon licorice mint and chocolate basil, wild things. And there were sunflowers that were like 6 feet tall, and they had flower heads that were like 12, 14 inches wide, and it felt like the flowers would follow us as we went through the garden. And there were bees and birds and butterflies, and I realized as I was walking through this garden that this gardener knew these plants better than many people know their own families. And I also, as we walked through, I realized that my senses were just dancing. It was so beautiful. The colors and the shapes and the smells and the tastes, I was in delight. And I wondered whether the Garden of Eden might have been based on a garden like that. And as I came to the end of the garden, a really striking thing happened, which was that I felt as though the spirit of the natural world tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're working for me now." And I was shocked. And I said, "Oh no, I don't know anything about this. How can I do that? I have no idea how to work for you." And I thought of my life where I hated science and I loved arts, and here was nature saying, "Work for me." But it was really unmistakable. And so I quit my job in an arts organization and I went to work for a company that Kenny and some other gardeners founded called Seeds of Change. And it was a biodiversity garden seed company intended to help spread diversity back into the food system. And it was the steepest learning curve of my life. I became asked to be president of the company as it was growing very, very rapidly. And even though I didn't have any formal business training, I had a lot of common sense and I was lucky enough to be good at business. And I felt like it was a really sacred period in my life because I felt as though I was employed on behalf of the diversity of all of life and the sacred fertility of the natural world. And so in some sense, as I work with women's leadership and restoring the feminine, it's still the same call. It's just had new branches of the tree emerge over time.
What a beautiful story. What is the unknown for you? What does represent the unknown for you?
Oh. Well, the unknown for me. Oh, what a good question. I have two different reactions at once. And one is that I find myself practicing becoming more and more comfortable with the unknown, because I think that the time we're living in demands it of us. And I think that the way that we can cultivate our own resilience as change makers and as leaders is to be more comfortable with not knowing. And I also think that there's great power in not knowing. I learned that when I was running a company, that I could trust in knowing what I really knew deep inside without having to know all the facts or figures or answers. But the first thing that came up for me when you asked that is that what's unknown to me is what's going to make our tipping point happen, that's going to really shift enough people to change our world and to believe in themselves, in each of ourselves and in our own capacity, each as individuals, to affect change so that together we can rise up and hold our governments and our corporations accountable to make the changes that we really know need to happen.
Mm-hmm. He says, I have to ask you the question that Patch Adams normally do. Do you have a love strategy? And how's that love strategy?
A love strategy?
Yeah.
A love strategy. I guess my love strategy is to keep investing in my heart and to keep... Someone once taught me that one of the greatest ways to make change is to keep investing in your desire. She said your desire lives in a chamber behind your heart. And if you keep investing your awareness and your attention in what you really yearn for in your deepest heart, it will help draw it to you. So I think that's part of my love strategy. And to give myself permission, even though it's scary, to love as much as I do, because it frightens me to show people publicly how much I love the world and how much love I have in me. And I think, for me anyway, that seems to be part of my assignment or my purpose. is to reveal my heart openly and vulnerably in a way that I hope helps everyone else feel a little more permission to invest in their love. Because I think our love is what's going to change the world, really. You know, when I turned 40, and I knew and I decided that I wasn't going to have children in this life, I decided that I would find my own purpose, that it was really important to me that I not find myself on my deathbed with regrets about not having fully lived whatever this instrument was meant to be here to do and to be. So I set myself a challenge, really, and I pursued it very intentionally over a course of 7, 8, 9, 10 years to really understand what I felt, what was most calling me and what was really for me to do, and not for anybody else, but for me. So that was a challenge that I set myself, that I felt like there were often times when I didn't know if I was making any progress. But over time, by practicing and being rigorous with myself about staying true to my intention, I found changes started to happen. Another one was a question that somebody else asked me. I have a very dear girlfriend and mentor, and she said to me, "Nina, when are you going to become more important to yourself than your husband or your job?" And I was shocked. And I knew, as soon as I heard her, I knew that she was right, and that I had understood my own value based on my partnership, my husband, and my work. And so I set about developing practices and strengthening my own muscle to be kinder to myself and love myself more. And over time, I think it really helped me to shift my orientation from serving that which called me externally to serving on a deeper, more spiritual and inner level.
One last question is, good examples to inspire. Like we are mapping good examples, good ideas, good projects. Please tell us one to share to the public, to be inspired or to support or
there's
whatever.
So many, you know. It's hard to pick just one. One that I really love right now is a woman named Lily Ye. And Lily is an artist. And she was trained as a classical artist. And then she decided that she wasn't fulfilled enough by making beautiful art. And so she started working in a low-income community inside of an inner city. And she started making mosaics. And she started engaging the people in that community, the homeless people and the drug-addicted people, to help her make mosaics out of broken things. And she made beauty in a very broken place. And through her perseverance and her vision, that place became transformed to the point where they actually got funding to create low-income housing and transform the whole neighborhood. And it's an amazing story. And she's actually on YouTube if anyone wants to see. There are wonderful, wonderful stories of inspiring people, all under Bioneers in YouTube. And Lily then decided that she felt called to work globally. And so she started an organization called Barefoot Artists. And she met somebody who told her about the genocide in Rwanda. And she was called to go to Rwanda. And so she went to Rwanda and she created a genocide memorial in Rwanda. And it's a magnificent story. Terry Tempest Williams writes about it in her newest book, and it's very beautiful. Really about how art can transform places of brokenness and heal the human spirit. So that's one. There are many, many, many I could tell. Another that comes to mind is a woman who has been a great mentor to me, she's a fifth-generation fisherwoman who lives on the Texas Gulf Coast in the U.S. And she has a high school education and 5 kids. And one day she learned that her little county of 5,000 people was the most toxic county in the entire nation. And she had grown up on the sea, and she saw the sea as her mother, her grandmother. She loved the ocean. And when she learned that her county was so toxic because of the multinational chemical plants that were there, she started educating herself. And she started a nonprofit, and she started filing legal briefs against the multinational chemical corporations. And she actually won judgments against them. She sank her shrimp boat on top of one of their effluent pipes, and she actually won legal cases against multinational chemical corporations where they agreed to zero discharge because of her actions. And she did it all herself and without formal education. And it's a fantastic story. And we have a book coming out. It's an anthology book of inspiring stories. And it's about how women and some men are really transforming what leadership looks like. And it's called Moonrise, The Power of Women Leading from the Heart. And it's about 35 amazing stories, all by all these kinds of women who have shown what a huge difference one person can make, and have really led from the place of their own inner authority and their love, and made tremendous changes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. You are a wonderful interviewer, and you write great questions.